Okay, this screencast is going to pick up with free African Americans. We left off in class discussing that freed African Americans in the North are not going to have the easiest lives. They are often forced to work jobs that no one else wants, and they're not getting paid really high wages. Most of them are not allowed to vote. There is public segregation implemented. And unfortunately, there was always the risk that they could be captured and resold into slavery. Now, of course, most African Americans who were free would fight for abolition and fight to end slavery, but there were some very rare cases in which African Americans who became free owned slaves themselves. This is very uncommon, but it did happen. Okay, we're going to move on now to abolitionism, which is the kind of idea of abolishing slavery completely across the country. This idea is going to kind of be born at this time, and it's going to grow in popularity, but I want to be clear that just because many of the northern states are freeing their slaves does not mean that they're all calling for the abolishment of slavery throughout the country, okay? And that's kind of where we get to a states' rights issue, because some of the states want to just allow the states to choose what they want to do, and then some people are going to be calling for the federal government to get involved and kind of clean house. So it's just going to kind of depend on the person. But the abolition movement will grow over time. Some of our earliest abolitionists that are fairly well known, we're going to start with William Lloyd Garrison, who was a religious man and a well-known abolitionist. He views slavery as a sin, and he is going to publish a abolitionist newspaper called The Liberator. So there's some definite meaning with that title. He will eventually employ a man that you all may have heard of before, Frederick Douglass, at his newspaper, The Liberator. Frederick Douglass is a former slave who goes on to become a very well-known and celebrated writer, and one of the most well-known and earliest fighters in the abolitionist movement. He'll eventually break away from Garrison and form his own newspaper, which was called the North Star. Very influential paper in the movement. The other idea with abolitionism that we're going to talk about is the Underground Railroad that develops. Now, I want to be clear that the Underground Railroad was not at all underground. Okay, it's very much above ground. It's a system of safe houses throughout the southern part of the country where slaves would be escorted by a leader or a conductor, usually at night from house to house, traveling north and escaping into the northern free states. So, a system of safe houses. It would take, maybe several weeks to actually make it to the north. But they would move from house to house until they reached free land. Now, some escaped slaves would turn around and come back and help other slaves escape. One of the most famous conductors of the Underground Railroad was female heroine Harriet Tubman. And she's pictured on the screen, and she is who is going to be replacing Andrew Jackson on the 20 in a couple of years, which is very exciting. Okay, I'm going to do a separate screencast on the women's movement, so if you want to pause this and go look at the second video for the women's movement and abolitionism. All right, y'all have a good day. Write down any questions you have.